Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys. Today we're going to be taking a look, another look at Sky Strikers. Like, holy cow, I actually did manage to come back to this deck before another 2 seasons had passed by. I did mean it too earlier when I said, like, I really like Sky Strikers. They just somehow they always fly under my radar as far as decks I want to try and improve with. And I decided that this season, I've been playing a lot of like Phantom Knights and well, ironically I actually just got done recording a Phantom Knight video, but like Prank Kids and like, yeah, I like to get practicing with those decks because they're going to be a lot more relevant in the future as adventure stuff comes out, but I still think it's important to take time for decks you just genuinely like to play, and I like Sky Strikers. I love the playstyle. I touched on this in the deck profile that we did fairly recently, which should be linked in the description below if you decide you want to check that out. A little bit more in-depth guide over this build, as well as more games to take a look at over there. But yeah, no, I really like that this is a control deck that's not a stun deck. That you're not just flipping up a floodgate, I mean, I don't really have a problem with floodgates, but there is still, it's definitely more engaging to actually have like responses and disruption as opposed to just flipping up a floodgate that says your opponent can't do a certain thing. Like, you look at our responses like, Widow Anchor, Shark Cannon, Imperm, all of our hand traps. Like Sky Striker, much like Trizu, is a deck where it really pays to know all other decks' combo lines, to know their choke points, because again, we can't just flip up one card and then that card just says your opponent can't do anything while this card's up on the field. No, we have to actually like decide at what point we need to use our response to stop their combo. It's just kind of, it's skill testing in that regard. So if you're the kind of person who likes decks like Eldritch, but you want to be a little bit more skill tested, I would definitely recommend Sky Striker. I've been having a blast playing it. I've been really liking this build too. That's the other thing too, is that in the past with other Sky Striker builds, I just really wasn't satisfied with them, and I just didn't really play with the deck enough to get to a place where I could, get the build where I was satisfied with it. I just didn't know enough about the deck, but now I've been doing a little bit more research, and I've also been doing a little bit more practicing, and I feel I'm pretty confident in this build. I don't believe it's changed at all, since the deck profile should still be the exact same. I've been thinking about a couple of potential changes, like maybe kind of thinking about taking out a Ghost Belle for a second Nibiru. I really want the second Nibiru in general. That's almost assuredly going to get added in. I just got to figure out what's going to come out. Might be a second Ghost Belle, might be the Avarice, might be the Terraforming, might be maybe a second multi-roll, but probably not. Yeah, I'm just not too sure yet. Third Imperm wouldn't hurt either, especially in a Sword Soul heavy format, but if I was playing on ranked ladder still, like on my way up to Diamond 1, I'd probably be playing 3 Imperm right now, honestly. But yeah, the Avarice is definitely, I think I talked about this in the deck profile too. The Avarice is like the most flexible. Like, this is card number 40, right? It's not really like a card I went out of my way to include. It just kind of is card number 40. But I do still really like Avarice for games that go longer to refill your extra deck. And given that we're a control deck, games that go longer are not terribly uncommon. So I am keeping the Avarice for now. Yeah, like I said, though, the build isn't really any different, so I think I'm just going to quickly go through it card by card, and then we'll take a look at some games here. So we've got 2 Effect Veiler, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, 1 Destiny Hero Celestial, 3 Sky Striker Ace Raye, 1 Sky Striker Ace Roze, 1 Destiny Hero Dasher, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpie's Feather Duster, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 1 Terraforming, 1 Pot of Avarice, 2 Sky Striker Mobilize Engage, 1 Sky Striker Maneuver Afterburner, 2 Fusion Destiny, 3 Pot of Prosperity, 1 Sky Striker Airspace Area 0, 2 Sky Striker Mecha Modules Multi-Roll, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Sky Striker Mecha Hornet Drones, 2 Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor, 1 Sky Striker Mecha Shark Cannon, and then finally 2 Infinite Permanents. Down here in the extra deck, we've got 1 Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Sky Striker Ace Kagiri, 3 Sky Striker Ace Shizuku, 3 Sky Striker Ace Hayate, 1 Sky Striker Ace Kaina, 1 Crystron Halki Fibrax, 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda, 2 Sky Striker Ace Zeke, 1 Celine, Queen of the Master Magicians, and then finally 1 Access Code Talker. So we have a nice little variety of games to show, where we get to do a whole bunch of different lines and show off some good games that show like good examples of how the deck functions at its core. Yeah, just a decent batch of games I got for you guys here today. So without further ado, let us jump straight into them. Okay, so this game is going to be against an Eldritch deck, and I actually really liked this game just as an example of one to show on the channel, because it really demonstrates how just gaining gradual advantage over the other player with your effects is how not just Sky Strikers but kind of more control decks in general tend to function. So opponent's going to lead with the Eldritch or Black Awakening, so they're pretty obviously Eldritch. I'm going to use Ash to stop this and not Maxx here, because I really just stop them from getting their Eldritch out on the board at all, as opposed to just like cycling the Maxx here. So fortunately for me, they only have one face down card. That's very good to see. Although this deck doesn't tend to get hurt by back row as much as their decks, it still can be very painful. So I'm going to lead with the Mecha Hornet drones here and go into the Hayate. I kind of want to see if I can set up a draw off of this engage, as well as, you know, not just the search. So we'll send in modules because I've got 2 of them, and I don't particularly need it this time. Now, I'm actually even going to throw out the Widow Anchor here to negate the Hayate to get the 3rd spell engrave. And that might seem a little odd to do that, because it might seem like a waste of advantage, but we're definitely going to be gaining back that advantage and more by doing so, because not only do we search and draw, but now we get Kagiri, or Kagiri rather, not Kagiri, and we can wheel back the engage to our hand. And since we just searched a multi-roll off of that first engage, now we can activate the multi-roll and then do the second engage, and then set up even more advantage. So when I talk about you know, Sky Striker as a deck wanting to set up incremental advantage to gain you know, to gain a foot up over your opponent, this is exactly what I'm talking about here, right? Like, see how few cards our opponent has versus how many cards we have. And again, it's because we used that Widow Anchor to set up the 3rd spell engrave that we were able to get multiple searches plus draws, multiple +1s off of our engage there, but not only activating it, but then also wheeling it with Kagiri. So we're also able to set up a multi-roll to get more of our cards back to the board as well for use during our opponent's turn. So they do have the Ice Dragon Prison here, which is going to keep me from setting up DPE. I do at the very least get to cycle Maxx by doing this here. So our opponent makes a bit of an odd decision, in my opinion, here. They go ahead and they, the effect's already resolved, so I don't know why they didn't just banish my Raye, but decided not to. I mean, that's totally fine with me, but funnily enough, we actually end up drawing the Fusion Destiny off of our 1 Maxx draw, so even that Ice Dragon Prison really is not going to be enough to stop us from getting ending on DPE here. Now, you do need to be mindful with if you end on DPE that, you know, obviously we can only use our Sky Striker spells if our main monster zones are unoccupied. So we are definitely going to have to use DPE before we Shark Cannon. Another nice thing about setting up the engage in that situation with the multi-roll, or rather setting up the multi-roll with the engage in that situation, is that we are then able to not only set the engage back down for our next turn with the multi-roll, but because we no longer have an engage in our graveyard, then during the end phase we can use Shizuku's search effect to get another engage. So we have not 1, but 2 of them set up for next turn for even more just insane amounts of advantage. So even if we don't like win on this next, or even if we don't have like the game, you know, solidified by this next turn, we still at the very least are able to get multiple draws there. So yeah, so we have, like I said, the multiple engages here. I decided to let the DP get destroyed because I didn't want them to set up a Golden Land, you know, trap card during the end phase. So I'll just pop the trap card. It's an Eldritch, I think, with that one. Either way, I didn't want them to activate the end phase effect, so I decided to just go ahead and blow up the face down during my turn. I'm gonna search a Roze here just to kind of like have it, I guess, I don't know, in case it becomes relevant with the first, what do you call it, engage there, and then I'll just grab Area 0 with the other one in case I need to search, like, pull a Raye out of my deck later this turn, which I think we do actually end up doing. I don't know if it's this turn or the next one, but it is definitely going to come up. Plus, by this point, you know, I've pretty much got access to all the different Sky Striker spells, so we can be a little bit more niche about what we search here. That's kind of what a lot of the, you know, playing this deck is. You're just kind of like setting up your toolbox, right? Oh yeah, so here we're going for the access code line. I'm going to try to go for lethal by then summoning this Roze after I get the access code out. But sure enough, they've got the Nibiru. It's funny because Eldritch is not really a deck that typically plays Nibiru from what I've seen, and so for them to have it in exactly this scenario is like, it's like the perfect storm almost. But we're able to use multi-roll to get rid of the tokens so we can use our Sky Striker spells. Definitely good that we had that because it would have been a pain if we didn't. And then, yeah, we can just go ahead and get rid of their Nibiru here as well. I thought about using the Shark Cannon, but obviously I don't want to do that until I can make sure that my other spells, go through. Plus, we've got a DPE coming back, so you have to be mindful of that too. But we are able to set up a Shark Cannon and a Mecha Drones and a Widow Anchor here, so that's really nice. I'm going to use my call by here to just try to get rid of this Eldritch and or prompt response from my opponent. We do prompt them to activate the Scarlet Sanguine at that point, so that's good. I want to use it now because it's the only thing I can use while the DPE is still on the field, and obviously I don't need a DPE right this second, so rather than just wait and see what develops, I'll use my one response. And if they send the multi-rolls here, that's fine. I don't need multi-rolls anymore this game. I know by this point in the game that, my need for multi-roll has ended. It's already recurred everything I wanted to pretty much, so. Oh, and then, yeah, the reason I set up the Hornet Drones and well, obviously the Widow Anchor is just good to have during your opponent's turn in general, but the reason I set the Hornet Drones and another Engage is because I wanted to try to go for lethal again during my next turn, and at this point, like I said, I've already searched out, more or less my whole Sky Striker spell toolbox, so I don't really, the advantage from Engage is always nice, don't get me wrong, but I don't really need it. I'd rather have the Hornet Drones to have more plays that could potentially go for lethal here, so. Okay, DPE is going to come back. I'll sit both of these cards, then use Celestial and Dasher I draw two. Definitely better than Prosperity here. We'll go ahead and flip up the Feather Duster on the back row so that we don't have to use our DPE right away. We know it's the Huaquero. I believe we should know that anyway based on our opponent using their Eldritch effects. But then, at that point we summon our Raye, our opponent realizes his way of lethal, and then we can go for a game. But that game right there, if you want an example of how your ideal Sky Striker game plays out, that game is a really good example of that. Because again, Sky Striker is not a deck that makes big swingy plays to go for game. It's all about gaining small incremental advantage over the course of the game that's eventually enough that your opponent just can't keep up. They just don't have the resources to keep up because you've been taking theirs away while also building your own as well. And in terms of building your own, smart use of Engage in order to set up multiple copies of it at once like we were able to there is the best way to do that. So, all right, let's go ahead and look at the next game now. So this next game is actually also going to be against Eldritch, which is kind of funny because I would think, I'd have to think about this more. I'm trying to think if Eldritch is a bad matchup for Sky Striker. Because we specifically like to go second and letting Eldritch go first to set up all their back row is particularly, can be particularly devastating. Like it is here as our opponent just sets 5 back row. I have to imagine we're typically unfavored as a result of that, but I'm actually not sure. So I'm going to lead with multi-roll here. I'll send the Afterburners because I obviously don't need it. And just knowing that my spells for this turn are going to get responded to by any of these 5 back row is so nice. It's so worth the multi-roll effect here. And it's pretty easy for me personally. I don't know if other people in general have this issue as well, but it's really easy for me personally just to forget that that's even an option. So definitely make sure you're looking out for good use of that effect, like in this scenario here. The summon limit's definitely going to throw me off a little bit, but we're still able to get a decent bit of damage in. And we can still get our Sky Striker Engage set up for next turn as well. So, ultimately, I'm not super concerned about, getting stopped by summon limit here. Oh, yeah. That's right. I was like, I remembered as soon as I saw these cards get flipped up. That's why I wanted to keep this game. Just because, I like to add games like this, even though I don't tend to like to keep shorter games. I'll sometimes like to add games like this for a bit of levity, because I'm pretty sure we've all had that moment where Eldritch sets 5 on turn 1, and then you just lose all hope. But I wanted to include this game to remind you guys, and also the last game too, really, but especially this game, to remind yourself to just play it out. Your opponent might screw up like they did there, because what they were obviously trying to do was summon an Eldritch the Golden Lord by tribute summoning it, just to make sure it got on the field. But they got kind of screwed over there when summon limit, as they flipped up the Tiger and the Huaquero at the same time. I really hope I'm pronouncing that one right. And then they realized, oh, wait, now I can't summon Eldritch, and then they just conceded. So, like I said, definitely a good bit of levity. My plan there was to then go into DPE during the next turn, right? I was probably just going to use Hayate to go into Kagiri. Well, more like flip the Engage, activate that, go from Hayate into Kagiri, maybe even after attacking first. And then get back the Engage and then activate the Fusion Destiny, so DPE, and then use DPE to pick apart my opponent's back row. So that was my game plan for the rest of the game there, for those who are curious. But all right, let's go and look at the next game. Okay, so this game is going to be against good old Danger Kaiju, which is actually a deck I really want to try, but it's actually very similar to Heroes in that it just costs way too many Ultra Craft points. Like, between the Bigfoots, the Luna thing, Fairy Tale, let's see, one of the other Danger cards, I think, there's just like 12 Ultra Rares I'd have to craft. Dimension shifters as well, but I think it's 15 I'd have to craft, including dimensional shifters. But to be fair, dimensional shifters are probably going to happen in the relatively near future anyway for flows, but we'll see. So opponent's going to lead off with a trade-in. We're definitely going to ash that. It feels really good to ash that. Get your opponent, have them get the -1 there. And then the opponent does this thing that I see some people do, and I don't think it's right personally, where they just throw out the Maxx seed right away at the start of an opponent's turn. I think that's just giving too much information to your opponent face up. You should wait until they're committed to a play, or at the very least a special summon, and then activate the Maxx seed, not only to ensure that you get the draw and you get your proper advantage worth, but again, you're just tipping your hand if you play it that early. I think you're just giving your opponent the opportunity to play around it. Kind of unnecessarily in my opinion, but so we get Kaiju. That's kind of it's always weak when that happens, but it is what it is. And then we get Tapiered, which the terribly tired Tapier, good old Baguska here. But yeah, I don't often run into this card like stonewalling me. The few times I do play against it, I usually have something like this Widow Anchor we've got here to negate it, so that's not an issue. So, and we also have an Imperm as well, so we don't even need to use the Widow Anchor. I was gonna say, do I even have 3 spells in my graveyard at this point? 1, 2, nope, I only have the 2, so I thought that was the case. Alright, so here we can go ahead and get Z Mecha Drones. Now, unfortunately, we do have the Kaiju here in the main monster zone, so I can't exactly activate the drones, but we'll still get it just to have it. I can potentially set up a link too with this Widow Anchor if I manage to steal something. But then my opponent just concedes. I guess they can't out their own Kaiju, so let that be a lesson. If you're gonna put a Kaiju on your opponent's board, you should. I mean, I don't know. It's not like you should always. It was over a DPE, so it was still a fine play. And it's not like it's hard for that deck to have an answer to a Gamma Seal. But I guess my opponent just didn't in this case. But yeah, like I said, my plan here was to just hopefully kind of go for. Either have my opponent answer the Gamma Seal so then I could go for Hornet Drones to make plays, or if I draw on like literally any monster, I could go into Vert Anaconda. That would free up, Vert Anaconda, and that would free up my main monster zones. Like, I wouldn't have had a DPE to go into, but just being able to activate the Sky Striker spells, obviously, in the Sky Striker deck is one of the more important things to make sure you can do. Alright, got a couple more games here. Let's go and check out the next one. So this game here is going to be against somebody named a Drytron God, but they're actually playing Numrons, which they're a little bit late with that tactic. That was like a Season 4 tactic, right? Where you'd call yourself Drytron God, so that way you could make sure you got the second turn as the Numron player. I mean, not that you usually have trouble with that anyway, but funnily enough, we won this coin flip, so we actually forced them to go first, which ended up being really, really good. I wondered when I saw Drytron God is a little bit on the nose as a name. I mean, you want to be a little bit on the nose if you're going to try to deceive your opponents that way, but still, it made me wonder. I was like, And then when they didn't do anything at all turn 1, I was like, okay, they're either not Drytrons or they got the actual worst Drytron hand you could get, because I don't think I've ever played against Drytron that couldn't do anything at all on turn 1, like a total brick. I'm sure it's possible, I just don't think it happens very often. Although, to be fair, it probably happens more often nowadays than it did before, so. Well, it assuredly does. Anyway, yeah, I'm just going to go for a fairly standard turn 1 setup here. I'm going to smack him with the Raye and then go into the Hayate, smack him with that, set up the Engage here. I'm actually not going to activate the Engage, even though I went to the trouble of sending it and then adding it, because I've only got 1 spell engraved. I want to get more spells in the graveyard before I can. Also, I don't have a multi-roll setup, and by not activating the Engage here, we get to add a second Engage next turn. So this is nice, just in case next turn I need to spend a bunch of time, basically coming back. If my opponent is able to answer everything I've got on board, this is a very nice way to just make sure that you're able to have a good comeback play, is just having the 2 Engage here. So yeah, I definitely figure they're not Drytrons at this point once this starts happening. The Pankratops and the, what else do they play? The what was it? Oh, the Kaiju, of course. And then yep, with the Numron wall here, of course, now they show their their true colors, but even though they have the limiter removal, we're actually able to, thanks to the fact that we have Widow Anchor and Kaina here, we are actually able to ensure that we're not going to lose as a result of you know, the OTK or the limiter removal, because we're preventing this last one from attacking. And then even here we can, I could have Widow Anchored as well, but I actually decided to, oh no, sorry, I did Widow Anchor, I just did it, I could have Widow Anchored or Shark Cannon, but Widow Anchor was definitely the way to go here, because that prevents them from setting up a 4 material Appaloosa. They just look at the Infinite Track, but we've got the multiple engages, I can just search an Afterburner, so I'm not really particularly concerned about this Infinite Track at all. This is definitely not one of the decks that has trouble dealing with it, so. Oh yeah, that's right, we're not even going to Afterburners it, I'm just going to steal it with Widow Anchor. Just straight up right now, and then summon the Raye and just attack him for games. So, very, very satisfying way to beat a new Ron player with their own Infinite Track that's got 4K attacks. So, GG's Drytron God. Okay, so we've got one more game after this one. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so this last game, full disclosure, I added this game purely for humor value. This game is like one of the most pathetic, and I mean that on like both sides. Mine and my opponent's games of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've played on Master Duel. I'm actually playing against vampires of all things here. And I'm going second. You know, I opened the 2 C's and the Ash. I'm like, okay, this isn't a great opening hand, but it's still fine. So my opponent leads by summoning this vampire retainer. And I'm reading it, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, I just don't know pure vampires as a deck that well, right? So I don't know if they're going to special something from hand. I don't know if they just link this off into a link 1. So even though, again, I just said earlier this video too, I typically advise against just throwing out a Maxx C when your opponent hasn't committed to a special summon. Well, I figured by summoning the retainer, they'd already committed to some amount of plays. So yeah, I just decided to throw out the C here. Just because, again, I wasn't familiar with the choke point of this deck, but that's all the more reason why you want to be familiar with it. So yeah, they're using the Vampire Desire here to set up the Vampire Familiar in the graveyard. So yeah, we draw for turn, get a Veiler. Obviously nothing we can really do anything with. So I'm just going to summon the Celestial in battle. Yeah, that's going to cut me off from Fusion Destinies later, but it's better than doing nothing, I think. Better than just leaving it set up on the board. Again, especially when I'm not just super familiar with what the deck does. So the Vampire Familiar effect I know is going to special summon, so I'll go ahead and Maxx C here, just try to get a draw and maybe get something I can use. This Terraforming, definitely something I can use, so we're glad to have that. Yeah, I don't need them adding cards from deck to hand, so I'll go ahead and Veiler when they try to activate that effect of the Vampire Familiar. But they do end up triggering it anyway for the Vampire Duke, which lets them, I guess, summon back the retainer. Of course, now we draw the Fusion Destiny, which is like, you know, naturally we get it here when we have already committed the Celestial to the board. So if I just been like a little more patient, but of course I could have known I was going to draw it right away afterwards. So I think summoning Celestial in that situation where I just wasn't too familiar with vampires and want to get the retainer off the board was probably still fine. I don't like. It is ultimately going to be a bad play, but again, that's we've touched on this already, right? That's results-oriented thinking. So I'm just trying to figure out whether I made the proper evaluation. Of course, now we would have really liked to have this hindsight as we now draw our second Fusion Destiny for turn under yet another dead card. So I'm going to try to Terraforming for the... This is kind of what I mean when I say this is like the most pathetic game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I've played on Master Duel, because like neither me or my opponent are like doing anything here. Like, they have like a 1200 attack monster and nothing else. I've got nothing to work with at all. But then they go ahead and top deck the Samurai Skull to set up the zombie world. So that's a little like, oh, but does actually not even it doesn't affect this deck at all now that I think about it. But it just feels bad that I'm like, my opponent is doing so little. If I could just get like a Raye or an Engage or like something, you know, I feel like this game would be so much more manageable. But alas, that something does not come before my opponent's able to get their DPE online. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like I technically drew outs, but by summoning the Celestial, they were no longer outs. And I guess that the second Destiny Fusion, or Fusion Destiny, is never an out. So here I decided I'm going to actually make use of the quote-unquote dead ghost spell I top decked here, and as well as my, not quotes, definitely just dead Fusion Destiny. I'm like, I'm just going to set this Fusion Destiny because my opponent probably won't think it's another bluff. They'll probably activate DPE to pop itself and pop the back row. thinking that they're safe, and then I can use this top deck's Ghost Belle to stop the DPE, and then at least in that way I still have like a chance, you know? So that does fortunately end up being actually exactly what happens here. They take the bait, they use the DPE. I'm going to go ahead and Ghost Belle them to make sure that doesn't come back, and doing it this way will also ensure that... Oh no, sorry, for some reason I thought that I was thinking of a different answer. I was going to say make sure that they can't draw too late, but no, that's not the case at all. So disregard what I was just saying there. But yeah, at this point, I've got nothing on hand and board. My opponent's like, they're doing the they're doing the combos that vampires do. I couldn't really tell you a whole lot about them, but they do manage to put a good deal of decent-sized bodies on board. So again, I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, like, oh, if I'd had a Raye, or like, again, I just feel like there were so many different outs earlier in the game, but yeah, now the game gets a little less pathetic on my opponent's end and more on just mine. And the only reason I said pathetic on my opponent's end before is just because they weren't, slash maybe couldn't because of my limited responses, just really do a whole lot. And I don't know, it's just like vampires are just one of those decks where you think about them and you're like, I don't know, it's vampires. What does a pure vampire deck really do? But apparently they can do quite a bit. So we do top deck Roze here. Our opponent's got the Maxx. I'm just going to have to try to play through it, because at this point, if I don't, I'm just going to lose. So we're going to go for Hayate at this point. Move to the battle phase, go to attack directly. That puts him down to 1,000. And this is the other kind of infuriating part of this game for me here. Is like, I got them all the way down to 1,000. I got them down to 1,000. And I just wasn't able to finish. I mean, granted, they pay a lot of life points to use a lot of effects, as is want of vampires, but you know, I decided at that point, like, there's no way they don't have 100 more damage on top of this. In fact, I know that Link 2 can summon vampires out of the grave, so yep, I just decided to go ahead and hit the old concede a Reno button, but GG's all the same. Like I said, I just kind of wanted to show that one off, because it was, especially at the start there, it's just a little bit hilariously pathetic how little both me and my opponent were able to do. But opponent was able to stabilize before I was, so it goes. But all right, let's go ahead and go on to the outro now. Okay, everybody, just want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video like this. I got a pretty good reception from the Sky Striker deck profile I did. I wondered if Sky Striker was going to be like kind of popular among the viewers here, and it kind of seems like that's the case. So that also, obviously, aside from my own interest in the deck, does make me feel more inclined to post more Sky Striker. So if that's the case and you would like to see more, do let me know in the comments below, or just let me know whatever you want to see more of, as well as any suggestions as far as like gameplay and deck building. I mean, I'm not shy about admitting that I love getting the feedback from you guys. I like to say that I have one of the best, and I mean this too. I'm not like, I've been on YouTube for a long ass time, and I don't see many comment sections like the one we've got here at all, where it's people being supportive and offering advice, not just to me but also to each other. Like, nothing, like, even more than getting feedback myself from you guys, nothing makes me happier than to see you guys giving each other feedback and advice in the comments, because that's really what I would like to foster, is a community that helps each other grow and improve the game, and is definitely, we're on the right track for that. And I'm not even just on the right track, I think in a lot of ways you've already achieved it. So thank you very much for leaving your insightful comments. They really do mean a whole lot to me. As does the subscriptions, or if you want to subscribe there, that is going to be the best way to support the channel, as well as, you know, well, one of the best ways rather to support the channel, as well as get the notifications for when my videos go out, which they do go out every day. So if you're into daily Master Duel videos, then I would definitely recommend subscribing. But that's about all the time I've got for today, so thank you very much for watching again. Without further ado, this is XLex, signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.